morning, starshine.
Welcome to the real world. Whoa!
Mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin with
Breathe air.
There's no second best, okay?
GN.
Morning,
I never paused that one correctly. Sorry about that. I'm good with daily levels, but not so good with trade of the day yet. Fire new intro. GM. So, today is Monday. Feels like this last day was a lifetime. Where is my chart? There we go. Alright, so what's going to happen next? What are we looking at on daily trade of the day, I should say? Well, usually what happens, and this is what we do as traders, you base your decisions off probabilities, not certainties. There's two things I see happening here. One, so when I talked with Ayush on the stream yesterday, and when I talked on monthly preview and weekly outlook, I mentioned the risk of no bounce. And the reason why you can see no bounce is because there's so much sell pressure from so many people getting liquidated and people having to exit their positions at any price because they have margin calls or they're going to get liquidated. Like when things get really bad, it's not about, oh, we'll wait for a bounce and we'll exit and we'll cut our losses. I'm already, like, let's say a big player, $1 billion player. I'm already down 20%. I can't afford to be down 30 or 40%. I just need to get out, which is why you see these bounces making lower highs and having almost no bounce. So if that is still going on, I don't know, we don't guess. If that's still going on, what you're most likely to see is something like this, where it goes into one of these and it goes lower, right? And if it goes lower from there, we don't know. But you're either going to see that, in which case you can tell that the selling is not finished yet in the short term, or after you see these large leverage flushes, if that was the last push for now, you see it move into a very tight range, which would pretty much be in between this area where it is now. And it spends actually a couple of days doing that, right? So you're looking at one of these two paths as most likely. What people usually bet on, right? What traders usually bet on after these moves, that, oh, we're going to have a massive pump or we're going to have an enormous nuke, when in reality, quite often you see price just going into very, very low volatility sideways chop for a while. And all you have to do is look back at previous leverage liquidations to understand this, right? After this big crash down to 58k back in June, where it went from 65 to 58 really fast, we had our rally up, we had our bounce up, and then price went into a tight sideways chop for several days. Right? So since it moved up to from Tuesday until Friday, so for most of that week, price did not go near the lows, it did not have a big massive pump, it was a tight consolidation. You can see more of these as well. Let me go over to one that I remember from before. Let's go all the way back and look at the previous bull run to see some of these leverage flushes that come off the top, come off the highs, how often they look. And the way the price action moves next will be an indication for you, right? This kind of thing here, right? This kind of move, as you can see, obviously, is a sign that what I mentioned before is a sign that the selling is not done. There's more liquidations happening. If the bounce is shallow and it falls down and sideways. So this went from Thursday until Sunday. Like this was 3 or 4 days. We're talking days here. So when I'm on trade of the day, let's imagine this was like Friday morning over here and I was doing trade of the day. Friday had really not much. Right? This was Friday's whole session. A bit of a dip down, a bounce back up, no massive nuke, no massive pump. Several days later, the heavy selling continued. And that's the kind of thing that you're looking at next. Same thing that happens, over here. If there's a shallow bounce or no bounce, it's just going to keep drifting and grinding until we do find our eventual bottom. If it's more of a strong rally off the lows, which we obviously haven't seen yet, we see a strong multiple legs, pushes up, tries the dip, pushes up, tries the dip, pushes up. That's going to set a range. The price could stay in for some time. This one was in May and it stayed there until June. And we were able to spend a month inside of this. But you have to look at this. The majority of that was spent in a tight range here. So for almost a month, it went nowhere near the lows, and it couldn't even break above the high before it. You spent an entire month in a consolidation basing where the market's trying to figure out what it's doing, which looks something like this, where you see a move up, but then it just does that, right? So the point is, when you're looking at today, you might not see an enormous move. And I'll be honest, the only enormous move I can see is more downside, because the dominoes are already falling. The momentum is to the downside. If it's going to go significantly in any direction, it's going to be down, not up. Now, when I say that, you can't rule out the idea of a stock market rally and some kind of relief on the open of the stock market today at 9:30 New York, so 1:30 UTC. What could lead to that? It would have to be something major changing in the outlook for the carry trade in Japan and the fucking stock market collapse, and it's going to have to be probably Fed coming out, maybe just saying something, maybe some intervention. I don't think that's going to happen yet, because the Fed don't tend to move fast, right? I'll take you back to COVID just as an example. The Fed did not step in and say we're going to print infinite dollars until here. It was the 15th. It was Sunday the 15th. They had to come out on a Sunday and emergency announce. That was when the Fed said it. All of this happened first. So people talking about the Fed has to step in, they're historically slow at stepping in when you're looking at low time frames. And is there enough pain yet? Is there enough fear? Is there enough real, a catalyst for them to do it? I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. What I do know is that you don't have to do anything. And if the Fed does come out and give those words, that's a clear sign. Clear sign to the market. Once they say it, it'll be obvious. And you will have time, because people will still be in fear. Like, that's, again, go back to COVID. The Fed said we're going to print infinite money. And yet, all the way up here, I remember it. Maybe you guys weren't trading then or whatever. I remember it. Coming up, the Fed said we're going to print infinite money here. And here, people are like, it's going to crash. Because the whole way up, right, it was pure disbelief. All of this, look at that. Doesn't look good, right? Oh no, it's rejecting of previous resistance. Previous support is now resistance. It's rejecting. People were shorting this, even though it was a week after the Fed said, we are going to print all the money in the world. And so on and so on and so on. And this went on for months. People thought it was going to reject here. People were looking at this, it's going to reject the order block. Traders had completely flipped their minds into bearish, right? No, it can't go higher. No, look, it's rejecting. It's going to reject. And then it goes to here. Well, it hasn't made a new high yet. We haven't even reclaimed the COVID crash level. And so on and so on and so on. And then it spent 2 months here, not going higher. Spent 2 months consolidating. And everyone was bearish again. They're like, look, it's weak. It can't even reclaim. It can't get above. And of course, we all know what happened for BTC over the rest of 2020. But this was all after. All of this was after the Fed said. The Fed spoke over here. And we had all of this. And these are daily candles. You could have let the Fed speak. You could have done nothing for a month to the 14th of April, right, over here. And just bought there. Whenever it reclaimed that level. A month after the Fed said. So the Fed have said nothing. We are on day one of the real panic. And I think that if anything, it's more likely that there's probably just going to be aggressive continued selling, because there might still be people getting liquidated. And there's no signs of that slowing down just yet. And if it's a case that people are just selling at all costs, selling at any price because they need to reduce risk, no one's going to step in and buy that. Why would they? So if you're sitting on the sidelines with cash and you want to buy the most blood, and you know that, and let's say, not take us, let's take us out of it. Let's say you know that Justin Sun's getting liquidated, Jump Crypto are selling all the coins, and fucking a bunch of other, you heard rumors, a bunch of other crypto firms are really struggling. And you're sitting there with a bunch of cash, $1 billion of cash. Are you going to step in and buy it here? No, the market's collectively going to look and say, well, if anyone who does have cash wants it to go lower, and they're going to allow the selling and selling and selling so they can pick Bitcoin up at cheaper and cheaper prices. When this is all shaken out, Bitcoin is the absolute go-to number one thing to buy. How many times do we have to see it to know that everybody knows the best risk reward is BTC? But when it's happening, we also know with BTC that it can go super deep, and you can have big crashes, and you can have super heavy flushes, and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'll try just keep it brief for today because, you know, trade of the day. For today, I think either it goes into a tight sideways for at least a day, or we see immediate continuation to the downside. There is possibility of a rally for sure. I will put that though as the lower likelihood. If that's going to happen though, that's going to be based off the Fed and something they say or something that happens in the TradFi markets that makes the stock market rally, that makes the recession fears go down. And remember what Professor Ayush was talking about yesterday with the VIX, the volatility index? Well, the VIX is moaning, right? So he said, if you see the VIX go to 30 and then start to come back down, that's a really good sign. Guys, the VIX is telling you major panic. Like 2018, that was what was that one? That wasn't the taper tantrum. This was late 2018. Can't remember what blew up then. Obviously, this was COVID, right? So the VIX is at levels where it does not normally go to unless something significant is happening. And just let it play out. Like, this volatility is going to cause a reflexive domino effect to the downside. It can get much worse before it gets better because so many people were short volatility. Short vol is like one of the most risky trades if you're not hedged. But the reason why short vol works, this is a volatility index, right? What has volatility been doing since COVID? Going down. Basically at every moment since COVID, since April 2020, if you were long-term just structurally shorting volatility, you were correct because it was lowering and lowering. Look, lower lows, slight rise up in 2022, but then lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. And people get sucked in for a year and a half now, since 2023, just say, to where volatility gets crushed, until it doesn't, until there's a catalyst, Japanese yen blowing up, carry trade, that spikes volatility, and then it gets out of hand. If you think of people who are too long, they have to close. And so if the market's too long and it all closes, it sends it down. If people are too short volatility and volatility rises, they have to get out, which increases volatility itself. It's all reflexive. These things move in a very aggressive manner when they move. You're looking at really almost 4 years of low volatility unwinding, and we're on day 2. The odds would say it's probably not going to settle super quickly. If you look at though that where does VIX actually place itself, right? The VIX topped on the 18th of March 2020, right? And actually, I'll just go back over here. It topped on the 18th of March 2020, which, where was the market at that point? The market by that point was here. It had already bottomed several days after, right, in terms of BTC. So it was rising all the way. By the time the VIX peaked, the markets were already bottoming. So we could see the VIX continuing to rise even if the markets have bottomed. But look, Ayush is the master of this. He said, what you want to see if you're a bull is the VIX opening above 30 and then getting crushed down. It's clearly not doing that. Now, it matters what happens when the New York session, New York Open, happens, when we actually go into the full trading session. This is pre-market. Pre-market can be weird and fuckery. Let's see. But this is different, right? This isn't, leverage apes on crypto just got too long, got flushed out. This is a systemic shock to all markets based on positioning being really bad in certain areas. Japanese yen carry trade, equities too long, the Magnificent Seven, trying to unwind that, volatility spiking, people sell vol. Like, you're seeing something historic here. This is fucking, like, for traders, we're living through history. This is going to go down. We're going to look back at this in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, and say, oh, remember the Japanese yen carry trade that blew up? This is one of those events. When you look back at, remember the taper tantrum? That was 2018. That was when the Fed tried to raise rates and the fucking markets freaked out. Remember COVID? Remember, whatever fucking what was the one, the Forex one? Remember the 2012 debt crisis in Greece? Remember these are all these things where you look back. Obviously for crypto, remember Luna collapse, remember 3 hours collapse. These are these times. So when you're in that moment, the market expectation will be continuation of downside. For traders, you should be following the trend. If you're a day trader or short-term trader, you should be following the trends on the lower time frames until there's some invalidation of that. And most of all, you should be managing risk. And if you're not a experienced trader with day trading systems built, sit back, enjoy it, watch it, journal it, take lessons from it, work on your cash flow. Out of great chaos comes great opportunity. When the dust settles, guys, remember COVID? The bottom before an enormous bull run. The taper tantrum also bottom before an enormous run into COVID. And if you go back and overlay these panics, almost always come near local lows or market lows. Opportunity ahead, but you have to get through the craziness first, right?